Hello, mathematicians. Today we have lesson 4. Lesson 4 can be found on page 13. Okay, so what we're going to do today is find another way to solve quadratics. Today we're going to use our square roots. Now just to kind of remind you, if I have the number 16, that is a perfect square. So when I find the square root of 16, it becomes, well, we've always talked about 4. But what I want you to remember is that positive 4 times positive 4 becomes 16. So it can be a positive 4, but it can also be a negative 4 because negative 4 times negative 4 is also a positive 16. So when we are working with square roots in our quadratics, we can say that the square root of 16 is positive 4 and negative 4. Now instead of writing that twice, I actually just write the add sign and the subtract sign and put it together. So we've got the positive and the negative 4, which tells us that we actually have the roots of 4 and negative 4, and with my curly brackets. But you know us and mathematicians, we like to make things easy. So we write positive, negative 4. So I'll show you that as we go through a few of our problems. Now, when you're solving quadratics by square roots, they do have to look just like this. They do need to be ax squared plus c, and then we do make it equal to 0 so that we can solve it. You'll notice that there is no bx term. So in other words, it started out like this, ax squared plus bx plus c, but b was a 0, so we didn't write it. I know we've talked about that in class, and we'll review it again. Okay, so the steps, actually look at this. It's kind of nice. There's only 2 steps. If they're in this form of ax squared plus c, it actually makes solving and finding roots very simple. Okay, so very first, number 1, we have to isolate the x squared. So we have to get x squared by itself. So notice I have x squared minus 49. So I'm going to move the 49, the negative 49, over to the right side. So I'm going to add 49, and whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other, so plus 49. So now I'm going to rewrite it, just like I do all my equations. I've got x squared equals 49, okay? Now, what you want to do is take the square root of both sides. So if I find the square root of x squared, then remember, that is really saying that it's x times x. When I find the square root of x squared, I actually break it down to just x. Then the square root of 49 is going to be 7 times 7, right? But I'm going to remove. And I know I'm always running out of room here, so let me go ahead and get my sticky note. I should just plan ahead. Okay. So now I have x equals, and remember what I told you about that 7. It could actually be a positive 7 or a negative 7, so I'm just going to write both. So since x is a positive 7 and a negative 7, my roots are going to be negative 7 and 7 in my curly brackets. So you can actually write it 2 different ways. Okay, let's practice a few more. Okay, first step, isolate the x squared. So I'm going to take my x squared, and then I'm going to move my 16 to the other side. When I move my 16 to the other side, it changes the sign to its opposite. So I have to add 16, add 16. I have a positive 16. Now notice I'm going to take the square root of each. If you need to see what you're doing, I do this middle step, but I'm putting it on paper, but most of the time I just kind of do it in my head. It's okay, you can put it on paper or do it in your head. X squared means x times x equals, I'm taking the square root of 16, and if you need to, come over here to your green sheet. 16 is 4 squared. So that means it is 4 times 4, okay? Now, what I'm actually thinking of when I'm doing square roots is I find the number that they both, and I get rid of 1. My square root sign removes 1. So now I'm left with x equals, and remember this could technically be a positive 4 and it could be a negative 4, so I'm going to write both. So when I write my roots, it's going to be a negative 4 and a positive 4. And that one is done. Okay, let's try 2 more. Let's go ahead and take a look at x squared minus 100. Remember, I've got to make x squared equal to a positive 100. Notice how when I move that c over, it became positive. Now I'm going to go ahead and find the square root of x squared, and that would be x. And the square root of 100, and if you need to, you come over here, the square root of 100. So 10 squared is 100, so it's going to be 10. It's going to be a positive or negative 10. So as you can see, I've already shown different work because I am doing more of it in my head. Once you practice a few and you get them right, then you can also make that change. You don't have to put all the work on paper as long as you are getting the right answers. Okay, so let's go ahead and move down to some of the ones that are more tricky. Okay, I noticed that some of mine have a leading coefficient. Let's look at number 6. Number 6 has a leading coefficient of 6. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to remove that 6 from both sides. 6 is a factor of 54. So I'm going to divide by 6 and divide by 6. And remember, I can do this as long as I treat both sides the same. So now I have x squared equals 54 divided by 6 is 9. Oh, look at that. 9's a nice perfect square. So I'm going to find the square root of x squared, find the square root of 9, and I get x equals plus or minus 3. So my roots are negative 3 and positive 3. Okay, let's try one more. Let's go ahead and try. Well, you're probably all wondering what to do with this fraction. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this one. And I'll kind of show you on a calculator how you can do this. Now remember, I can remove this 3/4. I can turn this into a 1, but whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So one method that I use is I turn my 3/4 into a 1 by multiplying it by its reciprocal. So notice that I'm multiplying 3/4 by 4/3. All I did was flip it, because then these all cross cancel and become 1s. But that means I need to multiply this side by 4/3. Now don't worry, it is a fraction, but we do have a way to solve this on a calculator. So you'll get to use a calculator. I'll even show you how to press the buttons for this. Notice that I have 48. Now remember, this is technically a fraction. So I can go 48 times 4. When I'm multiplying fractions, I just multiply across. 48 times 4 is 192. And then 1 times 3 is 3. Now this is 192 divided by 3. So I've got my 192 divided by 3. And I get 64. Now this is all kind of a mess, so I'm going to rewrite it so I can see it neatly. This cross-canceled, I have x squared equals, and that is no longer 48, it is now 64, because you see I actually made it into 64. And 64 is a nice perfect square. So just so you can see, I should have been using colored pencils to begin with. I'm going to find the square root of each of my values. So the square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 64 is a positive or a negative 8. So my roots are negative 8 and positive 8. Okay, now go ahead and try a few on your own.